Namaskar everyone, and the very auspicious second day of Chaitri Navratri, the Anusthana, the Sadhana days, as per our Hindu New Year calendar year, we are to start the studies on 4 aspects of Mother's manifestations: Mahalakshmi, Mahakali, Maheshwari, and Mahasaraswati. I request Sri Srinivas and Mulugu to continue this Swadhyay, which we have been truly experiencing a great learning experience. Not taking a single extra minute, over to you.
Thank you, Nimesh Bhai. Welcome, everyone. We are in a very auspicious period, as Nimesh ji pointed out. This is a period of Navratri Sadhana. We have begun this week. As it coincides, we are also beginning the 6th chapter of the book, The Mother. This chapter is commonly called the 4 powers, because it is in this chapter that Sri Aurobindo, in answer to the queries of sadhaks in the ashram, decided to write about the mother. Who is the mother? What does she represent? In almost an answer to the bewildered sadhaks, when in 1926, Sri Aurobindo handed over the charge of Sri Aurobindo Ashram to the mother. And he told the disciples that henceforth they would receive spiritual guidance as well as material help from the mother. She would be in charge. In this series of Swadhyaya sessions, we have completed 5 chapters. Some sadhaks consider that these 5 chapters form the preparatory part by the time we come to the 6th chapter. It is said that when you go to Vaikuntha to see Sri Mahavishnu, there are 7 doors, Sat Dwar. It is after we cross the 7th door that we see Sri Mahavishnu with his consort Lakshmi on Adisesha, reclining in an ocean of milk. So as we have gone through these 5 chapters, now we come to the chapter which reveals the grand vision of the Divine Mother to us. There are, in the structure of this chapter, one can say there are perhaps 3 movements, maybe 3 vallis we would have called it in the Upanishadic terms, or 3 sections in the more English parlance. The first movement is actually about cosmology in integral yoga. This cosmology is a technical term. Essentially, what it deals with is, in this philosophy of Sri Aurobindo, in this framework of integral yoga, how does the universe come about? Who is the creator? What is this creation? What is this hierarchy in this universe? Does a hierarchy exist? Do gods exist? All these questions, the visible worlds, invisible worlds, all of these are answered in the first portion of this chapter. Sri Aurobindo delves into them to various degrees of depth. In fact, one finds that perhaps some of the important elements of life divine and synthesis of yoga are actually here. It's the grand scale of this universe and how gradually the universe came into being and the linkages between the material existence and the supreme. All of this is described in this cosmology of integral yoga. Then we come to the section that is most fondly, commonly referred to as the four powers. Sri Aurobindo describes Maheshwari, Mahakali, Mahalakshmi, and Mahasaraswati, the four powers of the mother that have stood out in the front of this evolution, as he says it, as he describes it. And then in the last section of this chapter, Sri Aurobindo kind of addresses the mental pitfalls that we have, the precautions we should take, so that we are able to see the Divine Mother, perceive the Divine Mother, and grow spiritually and evolve at a soul level. So broadly, these are the three macro movements of this chapter. Particularly the four powers of the mother. Many people have found it to have very, very powerful vibrations. It is mantric in its nature, as we have said many times, and perhaps in all the writings of Sri Aurobindo, which run into 30,000 pages plus, these few pages are perhaps the most evocative, the most powerful, the most suitable for invocation. I mean, the only other literature I can think of from Sri Aurobindo's pen is the Durga Stotra. I think that's about it. They are really stuti to the Divine Mother. And of course, there are portions in Savitri, like the adoration of the Divine Mother, not to forget that. So this is the background. As we go into this chapter, I will be drawing upon heavily from the writings of Dr. Ananda Reddy, whom some of you are familiar with. In fact, if any of you wishes to deep dive into this chapter, on the YouTube, under the title Reflections on the Mother, there are close to 26 talks in which he takes up each aspect that is described, particularly in the philosophy of Sri Aurobindo in the beginning of this chapter, and gives an in-depth explanation from Life Divine and so on. We will not go into that degree of depth. I'll touch upon it a little bit. In fact, today's talk will be on the cosmology of integral yoga. So some of you might find it a bit like over the head or very dry. The rasa is missing. Maybe you may have those kind of observations, but we will still go through it. I will also share some general comments that Ananda Reddy ji made. The Mother is a marvelous book. It is a bija mantra of integral yoga. It reveals the essence of the sunlit path. It is one of those books of Sri Aurobindo which addresses directly those aspirants who want to serve the divine while being in life and society. That is you and me. This book, he says, addresses directly aspirants like you and me. Even if we do not read any other works of Sri Aurobindo and the Mother, following the instructions given in this book is sufficient to practice integral yoga and attain a great intimacy with the Mother. Now, remember these words. These are coming from the pen of someone who has gone very deep and read each of Sri Aurobindo's important works many times over. And he says, even if you do not read any other works of Sri Aurobindo and Mother, following the instructions given in this book, The Mother, is sufficient to practice integral yoga and attain a great intimacy with the Mother. If we read the book, The Mother, with a devoted concentration, we will realize it is not only about the Mother and her 4 aspects, but it gives in seed form the very essence of integral yoga. If we want to know what this yoga is all about in its quintessence, this small book is a must read. He also goes on to say that the descriptions of the 4 powers, these words, have a mantric power of invocation. This book, The Mother, is sometimes referred to as the Matri Mantra, because like a mantra, every sentence, every word, especially in the 6th chapter, is loaded with layers of philosophic and spiritual consciousness and power. Every word and every sentence of this chapter is loaded with spiritual consciousness and power and philosophical import. So this is the power of this chapter that we are delving in. We all know, there was an episode from our ashram history. Once Nirod Baranji was writing a book on the Mother, and or a chapter in a book on the Mother. And he was feeling that he has already written everything that he wanted to say. What more to write about the Mother? When he was explaining this to the Mother herself, Champaklalji said, "Why don't you ask the Mother for inspiration?" And Nirod Baranji was a little shy, and Mother smiled, and then he left. And then he goes on to say that when he sat down to write, he literally received torrents of insights to write upon, and he felt that it is as if the Mother has blessed him and revealed herself to him. This is the prayer all of us must have when we are delving into this chapter of the Mother. Inwardly, each of us should tell the Mother, "Mother, there is a lot written here. Please give me the capacity to understand you. Please reveal yourself to me." With this spirit, let us now proceed to understanding one more framework before we go into the text of the chapter itself. This particular framework is given in a book written by Sri Aurobindo called The Record of Yoga. It is his own jottings and notes and things like that Sri Aurobindo has left for us, and many of us are trying to understand what he has written there. In that, he gives something called Supreme Self-Contained Absolute. This is the big picture of the universe that he first provided. Okay? The big picture. What is the big picture? He says there are 4 absolutes. 4 absolutes, completely the top. The first absolute, he calls it Tat, the absolute transcendent, the supreme, Paratpara, Avyakta Paratpara. Avyakta means that which is not revealed, containing all, limited by nothing. He calls it Tat. In Indian philosophy, there is, at a very high level itself, a distinction that is drawn when it comes to the divine. There is the expressed divine and the unexpressed divine. the manifest divine and the unmanifest divine. The Tat here refers to the unmanifest divine, featureless, completely devoid of expression. In Upanishads, there is a small invocation in Kathopanishad. It describes, in the Sanskrit, it starts with Na tatra suryo bhati na chandra tarakam, and it goes on. I'll just give you what Sri Aurobindo translates it as. There, the sun cannot shine, the moon has no luster, all the stars are blind. There, our lightnings flash not, neither any earthly fire. For all that is bright is but the shadow of his brightness, and by his shining, all this shineth. Now visualize in your own mind. No sun, no moon, no stars. Completely unexpressed void. Something of that will give us a little imaginative glimpse of that which is beyond manifestation and completely unmanifest. This is the first absolute. The second absolute, the Supreme Self, contained absolute existence, Satchidananda. The Ananda uniting Sat and Chit, holding in its absolute unity and dual principle. This is the highest in the manifest universe. That is why gods are described as Satchidananda Swarupa, the highest. It's a state of consciousness, and this is a triune. All the three are together. One cannot separate one from the other. You cannot draw a layered cake. This is Sat, this is Chit, this is Ananda. It's actually in unison. Satchidananda. In subsequent writings, Sri Aurobindo added a fourth element, Sat, Chit, Tapas, Ananda. One sees that in many of his writings also. Chit Shakti becomes one. Chit Tapas becomes one. It is a state of consciousness. In that sense, it is unmanifest with the potential of manifestation. This is where there is a spandana in the void. This is that space. In some cases, it is also referred to as the Hiranyagarbha, the womb, the golden embryo. The potential exists here. So when we look up from the physical, vital, mental manifestation, this is the highest that we can perceive, or the highest state of consciousness that we can embody. Saints over the ages in Bharatavarsha have attained Satchidananda Swarupa. So this is the principle which also comes down, and it is inherent in the universe. This is the second absolute. The third absolute, Aditi, the mother. Aditi is the indivisible consciousness force and Ananda of the Supreme. Its living dynamis, the supreme love, wisdom, power. It is the Adya Shakti of the Tantra, Parabrahman of the Tantra. This is the highest point of description of the mother that we find in Sri Aurobindonian literature. This is what mother represents in one way. In mother's own words, it is the world mother, creatrix of the universe. It is from here that she puts forth gods and worlds, all the things and existences out of her own spirit substance. In Savitri, the phrase ambassadress twixt eternity and change. So, the second absolute is that eternity. And here is the mother who is mediating between the manifest universe and the second absolute, Satchidananda. And it's not only the physical world she creates. From this state, physical worlds, mental worlds, vital worlds, subtle physical worlds, subtle vital worlds, overmental worlds, supramental worlds. This is the status of the mother from which everything ensues. In this book itself, the mother, this is referred to as the transcendent, the original supreme Shakti. She stands above the worlds and links the creation to the ever unmanifest mystery of the Supreme. This is the third absolute. And then we come to the fourth absolute. Sri Aurobindo says this is the Parameshwara of Gita or Parameshwari of Tantra. Here we have Mother Aditi who manifests Parameshwara and Parameshwari. Through Parameshwari, we have the four powers, Maheshwari, Mahakali, Mahalakshmi, Mahasaraswati. Through Parameshwara, you don't find it very commonly in our literature and so on, but I will mention it for the sake of completeness. There are four principles that manifest here also from Parameshwara. Krishna manifests in Satya Yuga, Balarama in Treta Yuga, Pradyumna in Dwapar Yuga, Aniruddha in Kali Yuga. So there is Maheshwari, Mahakali, Mahalakshmi, Mahasaraswati that come down from in the fourth absolute, and Krishna, Balarama, Pradyumna and Aniruddha in the male form. So actually, if you see, Sri Aurobindo drew a little picture explaining all of this hierarchy. He has a little flowchart of sorts. So it is there in his works. So this gives us an idea of what is the universal framework that Sri Aurobindo starts with. And from here, we can now go into the chapter itself. Like I said, if one wants to deep dive into these content, not only of what I have touched so far, but what is coming up for the rest of this session, it is a quite amount of detail, some of which may be philosophical and a little bit dry, but it is necessary to understand, and we will approach it to whatever degree we can understand. So now we begin the chapter. The four powers of the mother are four of her outstanding personalities, portions and embodiments of her divinity through whom she acts on her creatures, orders and harmonizes her creations in the worlds, and directs the working of her thousand forces. For the mother is one, but she comes before us with differing aspects. Many are her powers and personalities, and many her emanations and vibhutis that do her work in the universe. Now, this is a sentence one can underline. The one whom we adore as the mother is the divine conscious force that dominates all existence. The one whom we adore as the mother is the divine conscious force that dominates all existence. One and yet so many-sided, that to follow her movement is impossible even for the quickest mind and for the freest and most vast intelligence. The mother is the consciousness and force of the Supreme and far above all she creates. But something of her ways can be seen and felt through her embodiments, and the more seizable because more defined and limited temperament and action of the goddess forms in whom she consents to be manifest to her creatures. So this is a very, now you know why I'm saying this chapter is going to be quite a chat. Because in this one paragraph, Sri Aurobindo has given us so much to try and understand. He says there are 4 powers of the mother, 4 of her outstanding personalities. So when you say an outstanding student, you mean that there are many students, but these are the outstanding students. So when he's saying outstanding personalities, it means behind her there is another scores of powers and personalities. He's only referring to 4. So that is the context we should understand. And then he says, for the mother is one, but she comes before us with differing aspects. Many are her powers and personalities and emanations and vibhutis. So he is giving a hint which he elaborates in the subsequent sections in a very big way. But there are a few things we need to catch here. What does he mean by powers? What does he mean by personalities? What does he mean by emanations? What does he mean by vibhutis? So much to really, try and understand. Sri Aurobindo's words, powers and personalities, simply refers to different aspects of the same being. Different aspects of the same being. Yet, when we see the word power, Sri Aurobindo says the use of the word power, it can be applied to whatever or whoever exercises a conscious power in the cosmic field and has authority over the world movement. So, on one hand, we talk of many aspects of the Divine Mother as her powers and personalities. Also, in many places in Sri Aurobindonian literature, we refer to cosmic powers. And these powers can be divine, but they very well can be anti-divine. We saw this particularly in the chapter 5, where we talked about there are many forces that are holding money and giving a very vital imprint, and we talked about asuras, rakshasas, pisachas. You have to remember that. The anti-divine forces also exist, and they also have power. Not only do they have power, they influence us, you and me, regularly, in small ways and in big ways. With a naughty thought, with an irritation, with an anger, all of these are powers of falsehood, powers and appearances that still rule the earth nature. So this powers has to be linked to that statement also. We should be conscious. As we do sadhana and as we grow, we can become more aware when a wrong thought comes in. We can catch it. When we are not aware, we get influenced. We think, I feel like this, I think like this, and we act. But when we become more conscious, when a wrong thought comes, we begin to question, is this my thought? Do I really want to do this? That is where these powers and appearances, we have to be careful. Then we have emanations and vibhutis. What is an emanation? In one way, think of emanation as a ray of light, a simple understanding. So there is the divine, and the divine sends a ray of light that becomes a force or power that is working in the universe. Sri Aurobindo says, an emanation of the mother is something of her consciousness and power put forth from her, which so long as it is in play is held in close connection with her. And when its play is no longer required, it can be withdrawn. So this is how it is. An emanation of the Divine Mother can come, it can do its work, it can go back and merge with her. And sometimes when it is needed again, it can come back to work. All the gods can put forth such emanations. The emanations are identical with them in essence of consciousness and power. They contain the same vibration. They contain the same consciousness. So this gives us an idea of what emanations are. Even our thoughts can be our emanations. When we have a particularly strong thought and we release it, it tries to fulfill itself in the universe. This is called thought formation. When you will something strongly, it will manifest. What one should be careful about is that when we put out a strong thought formation without being careful, it can have unintended side effects and consequences. I recently educated one lady, a small thing that happened, and I'm just pointing out so that we can all be conscious. She has a grown-up daughter, and the daughter, even though she was living in the same city, she wanted to stay in the hostel for 2-3 weeks because of some intense project that was going on. And this lady was not very happy. She said, "You're a grown-up daughter." Basically, she didn't say it, but what she is you're a grown-up daughter, you shouldn't stay in a hostel, you should stay in the house. And you know how these days workload in academics is. Anyway, this young lady decided to go and stay in the hostel. She convinced her parents and mother and somehow managed to go and stay in the hostel. But the strong will of her parent wanting her to come back, it was so strong that in 4 days, the girl fell sick and came back home. 4 days. Because they're close to me, I knew the whole circus that was going on. I pulled the elderly lady aside and I told her, I said, "Do you realize what has happened? These are not accidents. This is your thought formation at work. You had a very strong thought formation that you didn't want this girl to stay in the hostel." No, but I did not mean that she had to fall sick. I didn't intend. I understand all that, but you had a clear outcome in mind and you got the outcome. Within 4 days, your daughter is back home. So we have to be very careful. We have to be very careful about these things. Consciously or unconsciously, we are releasing these thought formations in our life. If some negative thoughts occur, immediately the best thing is to visualize the mother, dissolve these things. I don't want it here. In some of the other paths of New Age spirituality, they also visualize a cross. They say, remember, when you see that thought, just put a cross around it. Visualize a cross around it. So whatever it is, dissolve these thoughts. Do not pursue them. Think of the mother, chant the mother's name. Sometimes it can happen, no? When you're hurt, when something goes bad, repetitively the repetitive mind keeps reinforcing it. Now let us come to Vibhuti. What is a Vibhuti? These are MP Panditji's words. Vibhuti is a great concentration of power put out for a certain purpose. When the purpose is over, the Vibhuti is withdrawn back into the original being. A Vibhuti is more selective, more concentrated, organized, and put out with a definite purpose. And here, when we say Vibhutis, we are not talking of subtle physical powers. We are talking of a physical manifestation. Somebody is born to do a specialized work. An emanation is a ray of manifestation that can be in a subtle physical world and work with its instruments in the physical world. A Vibhuti is a physical manifestation in many cases. There are Vibhutis in all fields. Field of music, literature, science, military, politics, religion, in all fields of human endeavor. So, for example, Sri Aurobindo says Napoleon, Leonardo da Vinci, these are all. In more recent times, I consider Steve Jobs to be a Vibhuti because the impact he's had on the world is very definitive, both in terms of the direction of human evolution as well as the wideness and pervasiveness with which it has impacted humanity. If we look back, I mean, You can think of Shivaji. You can think of Krishnadevaraya, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. In our parlance, in our history, these are people who have left such indelible imprints on the entire Sanatana Dharma Parampara that they have changed the course. Tyagaraja from South India, Tulsidas ji. These are vibhutis, and vibhutis are often physical manifestations that come. They change the direction of evolution in some way, do the divine work and withdraw. And the person herself or himself may not be aware of any of that divine origin. They may not even care for the divine. By the way, Joan of Arc is also somebody that comes into this category. Joan of Arc. One other sentence in the above paragraph that I wish to underline or highlight is that I'll just read the whole sentence. The one whom we adore as the mother is the divine consciousness force that dominates all existence, one and yet so many-sided, that to follow her movement is impossible even for the quickest and for the freest and most vast intelligence. The last part, to follow her movement is impossible even for the quickest mind and for the freest and most vast intelligence. Many places you will find in letters on yoga, so many places Sri Aurobindo writes to the sadhaks in ashram, do not judge the mother by your mental capacities. Do not judge the mother. Repeatedly he keeps saying, let us not try to apply the human logic to the divine. Let us not limit or let us not criticize what we don't understand. In fact, Sri Aurobindo says, the logic of the divine is the logic of the infinite. We can't even follow what that logic is. So this is something we should be capable about, careful about. Sir. Then going further, there are three ways of being of the mother, of which you become aware when you enter into the touch of oneness with the conscious force that upholds us and the universe. He's saying there are three ways of the being of the mother. Transcendent, universal, individual. He gives us these definitions. I want you to first remember these three words: transcendental, universal, individual. These three words repeat again and again in Sri Aurobindo's literature in many contexts. So if you understand it properly here, you can understand many aspects of Sri Aurobindo, of his writings. We are doing Life Divine Satsang with Sharad Bhai. Again, there you will see these words repeated again and again. If you get the basic thing, the minute you see the word next time, you will understand it. So what are these three ways of the being of the mother? Transcendent. The original Supreme Shakti, she stands above the worlds and links the creation to the ever unmanifest mystery of the Supreme. So here, we can visualize there is the creation, she's standing above the creation, and she is linking it to the ever unmanifest mystery of the Supreme. This ever unmanifest mystery of the Supreme is the first absolute Tat. What has not come into manifestation? That is why I introduced that framework before we came in here, the four absolutes. Because in itself, this will be difficult to understand. What is this ever unmanifest? It is that Tat. This is transcendental mother. She stands above the worlds. She is not directly involved. In a way, this is a plane of existence and consciousness that is beyond time and space. Infinity and eternity, that is what transcendent is. It is easy to remember this way, that when you think of transcendent, think of something that is beyond time and space. There are many other attributes. I'm just trying to give something simpler to hang on to. Then universal, the cosmic Mahashakti, she creates all beings, contains and enters them, supports and conducts all these million processes and forces. Now, this is the universal Mahashakti. She becomes the world. She becomes all of the world. Transcendent, she is above the world. Universal, she is the world. And individual, she embodies the power of these two vaster ways of her existence, makes them living and near to us, and mediates between the human personality and the divine nature. At the individual manifestation level, there are two ways of looking at it. One, we all know the mother, we have seen a photograph, we know who she is, we can say she is the individual mother. But what is an important revelation is that you and I are also a part of this quote unquote individual here. The individual souls are a part of this. The mother has herself said, go deep into your heart, you will find me there. That spark of consciousness, that psychic being is a part of this individual manifestation. So there is the transcendent, there is the universal, and there is the individual. This is an important framework. Try to remember it. So for example, when somebody says, Aham Brahmasmi in the Vedantic term, that is a universal realization. You have become one with the universe. It is not necessarily, in that sense, a transcendental realization. It is probably more a universal realization. There is a description here further of the transcendent Shakti. I won't read every sentence of it. You please take it up for your own sadhana, your own self-study, swadhyaya. The one transcendent Shakti, the mother stands above the worlds and bears in her eternal consciousness the supreme divine. And she calls the truths that have to be manifest, and then she brings down. The supreme is manifest in her forever as the everlasting Sachidananda. Nothing can be here or elsewhere but what she decides and the supreme sanctions. So this is a description of the transcendental mother. Vishwatita Chaitanya. It is above this Purushottama Sthai, This is the transcendent. Mother herself said the transcendent which is above creation, at the origin of creation, the universal which is the creation, and then there is the individual. The other word that is used for transcendental Shakti is Adya Shakti. She is the supreme consciousness and power above the universe. The Adya Shakti is the first primal Shakti. This is the transcendent voice. In the mother's symbol, the circle in the center, Aditi. So, gives us an idea. In the traditional literature also, we find this transcendental divine being discussed. In the traditional literature. Where do we find it? In Bhagavad Gita, Purushottama Sthai, not the normal Sri Krishna, the charioteer, not Parthasarathi. There is a reference of Purushottama Sri Krishna. He is of a transcendental nature. When he is giving Gitopadesa to Sri Krishna, he is from that voice. He is giving that knowledge. And then he reveals Vishwarupa, the universal manifestation, where Arjun sees, I am seeing 1,000 suns, I am seeing this brightness, I am seeing you killing people, I am seeing creation, I am seeing destruction, I am seeing all of this simultaneously happen in you. That is the Vishwarupa. So there is the transcendental Purushottama and there is Vishwarupa. In the Devi side, one sees Tripura Sundari. She is one beyond this Brahmanda. There is a story how in each universe there is an Indra. There was a Rakshas who did penance of the Brahma, and he got a boon from Brahma that nothing in this universe can destroy him. Bhandasura. So that man was destroying everything in the universe, and even the Indra of this Brahmanda could not destroy him. So then Indra and other gods make a hole in this Brahmanda, go to other universes and the mother beyond all these universes, Lalita Tripura Sundari. And then she comes down to slay Bhandasura. So that is how Tripura Sundari is not a universal manifestation. It is a transcendent manifestation beyond this universe. Similarly, if you see the Siddhanta of Gaudiya Sampradaya, which is what ISKCON belongs to, they have the transcendence Krishna, and in the individual, they have the Vrindavan Krishna. So it is two different Krishnas, or Krishna in different voices. So transcendent is not just something that Sri Aurobindo is saying. I want you to understand that there is a very rich description of this particular understanding in our own literature, far and wide. And this is something that we will keep in mind when we are moving forward. Then further, sorry, just one second. Now, in this paragraph, there are a couple of other references. I'll read one sentence from this paragraph. The Supreme is manifest in her forever as the everlasting Sachidananda, manifested through her in the worlds as one dual consciousness of Ishvara Shakti and the dual principle of Purusha Prakriti. So he's saying that the Supreme is manifest in her as Sachidananda and through her in this entire universe. How is he in this entire universe? Dual principle of Ishvara Shakti and Purusha and Prakriti. Now, Purusha and Prakriti is something that we can understand very easily. Essentially, all that is in and around us in the manifest universe is Prakriti. The theory of Purusha and Prakriti comes from Sankhya Yoga, Sankhya philosophy. They describe Prakriti in their terminology is a little different, but it will still give you an idea. The Panchabhutas, the five elements, they are a part of Prakriti. The Panchendriyas, the Karmendriyas and Jnanendriyas. In the human body, you have five organs of action. You have Karmendriyas, organs of action, Jnanendriyas, organs of perception. These are all a part of Prakriti. And Panchatanmatras, the subtle organs of perception. All of these 24 principles are all Prakriti. Anything that you see, anything that helps operate this body, all of that is Prakriti. Sri Aurobindo says Prakriti is the universal energy that also manifests in us. It is normally mechanical and repetitive. In the lower nature, it is impure and blind. Lower Prakriti is the power of ignorance. It is the field of play of ignorant forces. Prakriti is the source of cause, effect, and agency. Everything that you see here in the Charachara Jagat is Prakriti. And in us, it is manifest as the physical, vital, and mental. And the Prakriti in us has three gunas, Sattva guna, Rajo guna, and Tamo guna. Essentially, I can say that 99.99% of who we are and what we do, we work in the realm of Prakriti. Our thoughts, our emotions, our talking, our listening, all of this is nothing but a bundle of energies that is working through this body, Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas, and manifestation in the universe. So this part is very easy to understand. Now, Sri Aurobindo describes the Purusha. In ourselves, there is a poise of consciousness, there is a status of consciousness which can witness all of what is going on without any movement. क्षेत्र में एक ऐसी स्थिति हम पहुंच सकते हैं जहां पर हम पूरी साक्षी भाव से अपने आप के अंदर जो चल रहा है उसको भी देख सकते हैं और बाहर जो दुनिया में चल रहा है उसको भी देख सकते हैं। यह साक्षी भाव जब हमारे में आ जाएगा तब हम पुरुष स्थाई को पहुंचेंगे। By the way, don't confuse this Purusha as male and female. Both of us can have this witness consciousness. So, in fact, Mother says in agenda somewhere else that this is the male bias that has come into the usage of these words. Male bias during those times. Anyway, I don't want to deviate because that is a whole separate subject and I may not be able to do complete justice to it. Just know that this Purusha principle exists in male and female also. So other few things. So what is the approach of sadhana? We have to approach sadhana from the point of view of separate from the Prakriti. Do not get moved, don't get angry, observe the anger. Don't get hungry, observe the hunger. In Synthesis of Yoga, there are 4 chapters on this. Separation from the body, separation from emotions and energies, separation from mind, separation from ego. All of these things are there in the Synthesis of Yoga. One can read those 4 chapters. They're very easy to read and they're very, very insightful. So first we have to separate the Purusha and Prakriti. Then we have to unite them where Purusha becomes the dominant force which guides the Prakriti according to the highest levels of spiritual consciousness. In Upanishadic allegory, it is said 2 birds sitting on a branch, one bird eats the fruit, the other observes and eats not. And the bird that eats the fruit is the consciousness that we are in, where we indulge in Prakriti and we suffer the consequences. And the bird that doesn't eat is our consciousness in the Sakshi Bhava. So this is how it is described of Purusha and Prakriti. But what about Ishvara and Shakti? When in our Sakshi Bhava, we grow to a very strong poise of consciousness, where none of the normal limitations of the mind affect us, then we become from Purusha, we become Ishvara. As the mind progresses in purity, capacity for stillness, freedom from absorption in its own limited action, it becomes aware of and is able to reflect and bring something into itself, enter into conscious presence of the self, the supreme universal spirit. So, the consciousness that is merged in Prakriti right now, when we separate it and strengthen it, at an individual level, we feel ourselves separate, and at a universal level also, we can grow ourselves as a witness consciousness. This is the Purusha consciousness. This is the Ishvara consciousness that has evolved from the Purusha consciousness. Similarly, in the Prakriti, when we become aware of existence and presence of the universal Shakti in various forms, we realize that the same energy that is making a plant produce flowers and fruits, it is the same energy that is producing thoughts and emotions. Then we are able to see the Shakti aspect of the divine. And my dear friends, for us right now, it is a mental understanding. But as we grow spiritually, it becomes a reality. Some years ago, one young man was brought to Sri Aurobindo ashram. And he had a peculiar problem and he was asking people in the ashram if they had any solution to it. He says, sometimes I suddenly move into a state of consciousness where I see the energy flow in the tree and the birds and everything, and I lose my sense of identity with the body. I become that energy. So if I'm standing and looking at something, I lose this sense of personality, and I'm just looking there for 10 minutes. And people don't know why I'm standing like a statue. My sense of personality is dissolved into the universal Prakriti, into the universal Shakti. So what we are reading here may sound like strange descriptions, but as we grow in consciousness and capacities, they unfold in us. Not only do they unfold in us, we develop the capacity to control them, direct them, and so on and so forth. So as we come out of the clutches of Prakriti, and as we emerge into a higher state of consciousness, we can develop a sense of association with Ishvara and Shakti from Purusha and Prakriti. So this gives us some idea of what Sri Aurobindo is talking about in the transcendent consciousness and the universal consciousness. We have not yet started the universal one. We are still discussing the transcendent consciousness. We will take up the, it is now around 4:29. I will not do justice if I take up anything relating to the universal consciousness here. So we'll stop here. The next paragraph starts with the Mahashakti, the universal mother, works out what is transmitted by her transcendent consciousness from the Supreme, and so on and so forth. So we will stop somewhere here, and then we will take up the next section next Thursday when we meet.
We don't go for any observations and comments, but today, as Mr. Nitin ji pointed out, let me put it on record that I have been reading this book since at least 3 decades. We have been collectively reading this book at many occasions at various platforms, and many commentaries from Maheshwari ji, MP Pandit ji. You compiled so many interesting sources that we really got enlightened to. I'm really very happy that this is happening, especially during this Chaitri Navaratri, the real days of sadhana, when we open up ourselves, maybe transcendental experiences can come to us and we can realize something. If anyone has any question, one can request for an unmute by raising hand, or can unmute.
In fact, I will add one thing here. One of the devotees of Mother and Sri Aurobindo that I know, during Navratri time, she reads this chapter every day. That is her sadhana of Navratri.
So
they can unmute and talk.
You can unmute yourself, and if there is any question to any one of you, feel free to take this Swadhyay to interaction level. I think it was so clear, and it came with Mother's grace, so direct to all of us. There may not be questions, but if there is anyone, no one has raised the Swati ji. Please unmute yourself. Swati ji.
I think it's just a button that got pressed, probably. The hand is gone down. Yeah.
I think let us take a break here, and we continue with the next manifestation on next Thursday. Only a wish, let us take this to documented compilations by a small team of us, and anybody would like to volunteer to do this job, the listening to these videos and transcribing it to make it to a text to come out with commentaries on the book The Mother as one of the publication of Aurobindo Integral Life Center in time to come. Will be a great offering to Aurobindo and the Mother's reading in the 150th year birth celebration. What is your thought on this as a no,
All seva to Mother and Sri Aurobindo is wonderful.
fine. Let us take this thought. Hopefully we can work out on it.